building their capacity, Becky and I believe that is really all revolves around the principal-coach partnership and really kind of setting this collaborative relationship that focuses on one common mission and vision. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So I want to kind of give you a brief little agenda of what we're going to be talking about. The first part, we're going to give you a little oversight about who we are. Just a little bit behind my background, behind Becky's background, so you know who the people talking to you are, and we can give you a little bit of insight. We're also going to talk a little about instructional coaching in District 112. We've gone from, in a short period of time, from having no real resources in terms of curriculum, instructional coaches, to having a really successful model, which has really shown significant growth in our NWA, our IAR, in just a 2 to 3 year period. Also going to dive a little bit into instructional coaching and what it is and why it's important. So, you know, we're not going to talk about all these strategies, but right away, we want to give you just a little bit of background. What's the research behind instructional coaching? Why is it such an effective model for increasing teachers' capacity and empowering them? And then last but not least, we're going to talk about the collaboration. We're going to kind of talk about the day-to-day and what coaching looks like in our building, and how Becky and I kind of collaborate in all elements of that, and how we've kind of created this common vision and mission in terms of how we're going to lay that out with our staff. And as a result, how successful it's been in just, you know, a 1 to 2 year period. So before we begin, here's a little information about myself. I look like I'm 12. I promise you I'm not 12 years old. I started off as a Teach for America member, teaching in the inner city of Chicago, where I taught 2nd through 8th grade for several years, where I then went ahead and became a founding dean of social emotional culture and was able to co-found a charter school building with a good friend of mine. The two of us opened it together. From there, I served as a resident principal in the city, both with CPS and a charter school. And then most recently, before becoming a principal, I was in Deerfield, where I served as an assistant principal, overseeing the instructional elements of the school as long as the special education. And then now I am entering my 3rd year of being a principal in this new world of education. So that's just a little bit about myself to kind of give you some background. I'm going to transition now so you can learn a little bit about Wayne Thomas, and then we'll talk a little bit about Becky. So I think it's important you know a little bit about our school before we start talking about our journey. So like I said, I've been here for about 3 years. Previously to me coming, we've had the same principal, same leadership in place at our school. And at one point, we were the number one elementary school in Lake County, Illinois, which is really an amazing feat. But what we ended up finding, there was a level of complacency in our school for a period of time. And we went from being the number one school to 12 years of declining scores. And we became the lowest performing monolingual school in our district. Along with that, we had a lot of challenges in terms of culture. We give culture surveys multiple times a year, and we were consistently the lowest in terms of culture surveys for parents, students, and staff. So you kind of went from being on the top of the mountain to the bottom in a real quick place. So upon my first week at the job, I got a culture survey that was handed to me from all our staff members. And on that culture survey, we kind of saw the same 3 trends: lack of support, lack of resources, and just didn't ever feel like they were getting the development necessary to do the job. So when I started thinking about that, that was kind of the idea as I really started to lay the foundation of what we thought instructional coaching and professional development would look like in our school. And you're going to kind of hear a little bit about that, but I thought this was important to show you that we kind of did start at the bottom, and how quickly we were able to just year after year raising our IA scores almost double digits. So we're going to kind of talk to you a little bit about that. But before we go into the process, I do want to introduce my partner in crime, and she truly is my partner in crime. Becky and I do everything together. Becky, why don't you take it and kind of talk a little bit about yourself, and then dive a little bit more into what instructional coaching looked like in 112 and kind of best practices, if you would.
So, hi, I'm Becky Purser. We just implemented instructional coaching this past year, but I've been in the district for almost 17 years now. I was a 4th grade teacher at a different elementary school for 13 years and a 5th grade teacher for 3 of them. And I've been part of many different leadership teams in the building and at the district level. And what I found that I was in doing some of that work was incredibly passionate about curriculum and supporting teachers, and when they had questions and they wanted to do different things in their classrooms or had ideas. And so when the district posted positions for instructional coaches, I thought it might be a good challenge, and I'd make that difficult decision to leave the classroom. So it's just a little bit about me. And then I got placed at Wayne Thomas and a couple other schools to coach, and Michael and I just had a great partnership, and we're able to do a lot of great things at Wayne Thomas. You can go ahead, Michael. So I think what's really important, having been in the district so long, and how to implement and why instructional coaches and why our partnership was so important, was you kind of need to know where your district and buildings are, and come from that place, and how to implement and utilize coaches. So really where we were as a district was we had this revolving door at an administration level there. Administrators didn't stay for very long, superintendents didn't stay, and curriculum, we had no curricular resources to support student learning. We just kind of, teachers were creating whatever they could, and there was no consistency, and there was a lack of adequate professional development, and the equity across the district and consistency was absent. And then we came to this time 2 years ago where we had to close school buildings. So what we had to do was make some shifts. And in the last 2 years, we've come a really long way, where we've adopted some curricular resources and implemented them with fidelity. We have improving student growth, and there's been consistency for the first time across the district. We are finally implementing an instructional framework, which is Marzano's instructional framework. And just the last year, we rolled out the instructional coaches. You can go ahead. Okay. Because this is a brand new role in the district, we had many skeptical teachers. As with anything new, there are always questions and hesitations. In planning with principals, coaches knew the rollout of the instructional coaches was crucial to our success. And one of the things that was really exciting for me was Michael had really prepared and talked with and worked with his building to build the culture that it wouldn't be this scary new person in the building. The big question that Michael and I had to think about when we were planning is, how do we get teachers to actually see the benefit of having and utilizing a coach, and to not just think that this was, for struggling teachers or for somebody who got a, poor score on their evaluation. In Jim Knight's Unmistakable Impact, he talks about how the principal supports the coach and how that influences successful coaching and how well the coaching program will do. So this partnership was really important throughout the whole year, and modeling for the teachers that we were a team. So in this next, so what we did was we talked with some of the teachers that we worked with, and this video was the fear at the beginning, is what was coaching going to be like? And we really wanted to know raw, true and real emotions from the teachers. Many had no idea what to expect. They were coming off of this past year, the year before, we had implemented new curricular resources. It was the first time that anyone was really held accountable in our district for curriculum, for doing anything with fidelity, and there was consistency from one building to the next. So there was this fear of the coaches were the police, and we were there to check in on them and see what they were doing and report back to administration. We weren't, and we wanted to make that very clear. And it was really important to us that both Michael and I presented that this was not the case. We are working together in the building to change this dialogue. So this was just a little bit of what it was like initially. This is Shannon. She's a teacher in the building.
When I first heard that instructional coaches were coming to our district, I initially thought it would simply be someone who would come in and check to make sure that I was using the district given curriculum with fidelity. Perhaps someone who might report back to the principal and what I was doing in the classroom, and almost be that that watchful set of eyes. Those were my initial impressions. Then I met our instructional coach, and she gave a fabulous presentation about all that she could do to come in and help myself and other educators within the classroom. And I was sold. When I found out she could come in and be an extra set of eyes to figure out how to better engage students, how to deliver a lesson better, how to backwards plan a unit, I was 100% sold on this idea of instructional coaches as someone who could come in and help me hone my abilities as an educator in order to do better by my students. So it was a fabulous opportunity. So once I saw everything that she could offer, or an instructional coach could offer, I was sold, because who wouldn't want to better their practice as an educator?
So I think Shannon initially had a lot of fears that a lot of our teachers did. The idea that, is this going to be somebody who's going to run back to the principal right away and tell them what I'm doing or what I'm not really well with? And is this going to affect your evaluation? And we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about this, because an underlying theme that's going to continue to talk about through this whole process, and even when you introduce coaching, is trust. What does trust look like? So before we get into that, though, we want to talk a little bit about just your experience with coaching in your district, whether it's been a principal working with you or an instructional coach or a mentor. What does that look like for you? How did you feel? What did that experience, how did that affect you? And then talk to your group a little bit about like what you're hoping to learn a little bit from this session today. So if we could we go ahead and break them off into some small groups here and some breakout sessions, and maybe groups of 4 people if possible?
Right now, we have 18 participants. We're going to break up into 4 different rooms, so 4 to 5 participants per room. So I'm going to go ahead and create those. You should get a notification when you're in your room. If you could, go ahead and take turn your camera on if you have it, and then unmute yourself so you can just briefly introduce yourself and begin that conversation.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. And we'll go for about 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if you could put some of your thoughts just in the chat, because it's helpful for us to see, what you're hoping to learn or some of your experiences. That might be a good place for us to see some of that.
All
So
right.
here we go.
Thank you.
So Michael, I can broadcast a message to all rooms. You want to maybe give them, say, 2 to 3 more minutes?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And then we're going to get a little bit more into the research behind it. And then we'll talk about how Becky and I partner up.
And then I'll have them, when we come back, we'll just remind to chat in those ideas to the main chat and go from there.
Yep. Those are just really, we just want to have some ideas in terms of if we want to maybe move some things around, or maybe answer any questions at the end. Didn't even see that. And then Kevin, we'll have one more breakout room at the end, and just
Okay, great.
same process, 2 to 3 minutes, and go from there.
Perfect. All right, ready?
Yeah, let's bring everyone back then.
All righty. Oh, it's going to count down for 1 minute.
That's fine. No worries.
Thanks everyone for jumping into those breakout rooms. I know that might not have been something that you were expecting. So thanks for having those conversations and, you know, sharing some of your experiences or what you're hoping to learn from the session. Do we want to, does anyone want, I mean, I know that not everybody's expecting to, you know, share, but is there anybody who wants to share something? We can give you like a minute if anyone want to jump in and share something that they're hoping to learn or what their experience has been like.
And if not, no pressure.
Right, no.
We just got everybody back.
Okay.
Becky, if you just want to say that again, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Just thanks for, you know, jumping in and having conversations in the breakout rooms. We just wanted to know if anybody wanted to share something that they were, you know, hoping to learn or that what their experience with coaching has been. Does anybody want to share something? And no pressure.
Yeah, I would like to share it.
He did not have another job, but his God will provide. That's what he said. Yep.
Yeah.
He said, I do not know what's next. I am not leaving you because I have other opportunities. I leave you to make room, and I believe wholeheartedly that my God will provide. That's what he said. Sure did.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is Melissa. I'm from Chicago. I think one thing for me that
Go on, Melissa.
I'm sorry. I think the biggest struggle for me that I just have not mastered yet at this point as an instructional coach and leader is just really finding a good system to stay focused with each teacher. I feel like I end up feeling very scattered in my work with teachers, and just really looking for some insight on systems and structures that work well to really stay focused in goal setting and making very specific improvements with teachers.
We can definitely touch on that. I think as we move forward, we'll talk a little bit about, but the role can feel scattered because everyone kind of has different goals and different things that they're working on. But there's some ways to streamline it and ways to approach things that can be helpful and make you feel like you're less all over the place all the time.
Yeah, that might be a nice part to talk about when we get into the one-on-one coaching, Becky.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Teresa from Chicago.
Hi, Teresa. Where in Chicago are you from, Teresa?
I don't work for CPS, but I live in South Shore.
Oh, okay.
So I used to work for a North Shore suburban school district as well, and I was department chair. And I also had an instructional coach, and I used to be an instructional coach and a staff developer. Mm-hmm. And in our system, as department chair, I was the primary evaluator. My instructional coach was not in an evaluative position. And the instructional coach would do walkthroughs regularly, so teachers expected it and actually welcomed it. Mm-hmm. And every week I would sit down and just do like an overall like meeting with my instructional coach where she might list just overall issues. She wouldn't name particular teachers unless it was something that, you know, was being, that was just overt. Something that was dangerous either for them or the students. So it was actually a good partnership. None of my evaluations individually were based on what the instructional coach did, but my professional development was based on that, based on common concerns that she noticed throughout the department that teachers were exhibiting or talked about. So it was actually a great relationship.
No, that's amazing. That's, I'd have to say that's common. One of the rarities. I feel like most people have the opposite effect. So that's amazing to hear you had such a positive, experience.
Yeah.
And we're definitely going to touch on some of those things. Anyone else? Okay, why don't we go into the research a little bit? So it's really, when we talk about professional development, what is really important to take a look at, and I think this screen, if you just kind of take a minute to let it resonate for a minute of like the different types of professional development and its impact on teachers, we see where the actual use in the classroom and how teachers develop skills, where that actually is most effective. With the knowledge of this, Michael and I knew we needed to establish a system that fostered individualized professional development. So teachers would utilize new skills in the classroom. And when we look at this, and I know that many of us have at times been in a one-size-fits-all professional development, or we've been part of, just like a class that is just about theory or discussion. But when it comes back to actually using it in practice, we look at that 95% at the bottom there where coaching in the classroom or coaching with a teacher, the likelihood of it being used in the classroom and used well is 95%, where some of those other areas are 0 and 5%. We look at where we spend our time and our energy, and this form of PD is really individualized for teachers. This model really does hit home, I think, to a lot of us in the experiences that we've had. I know there were trainings that I went to at times that I was excited to try something new, or when I returned to my classroom, it was, this is going to be great. And then I get there, I get overwhelmed, I get busy, and I couldn't sustain that. And I didn't have necessarily the knowledge or the people to go to kind of refresh my memory on the things that I had learned. So coaching really meets teachers where they're at and allows them to set goals based on the students' needs in the moment. And that's really why this research and shows that coaching is really the best form of PD for teachers. So does one-to-one coaching, helping a teacher set goals and providing tailored feedback to enhance teaching, improve teachers' practice? Researchers Matthew Kraft and David Blazar examined about 60 studies examined what 60 studies showed about the efficacy of coaching for strengthening teachers and lifting student achievement. And their two-word conclusion was coaching works. And I think that when we think about what can have the most impact on our students, and when we go back to even the previous slide that we just shared, is that we're not all in the same place. Our students aren't all in the same place, and what one teacher needs or has goals for with their one particular class that year isn't always the same as what another teacher has. And so this really allows for some individualized PD. So in this video, Shannon is that same teacher. She's just talking about her decision to work with a coach and how it continued and really leveraged some of the things that she did within her classroom.
I first decided to work with our instructional coach when I was implementing a modified center system that I have done every year, but I always change it up a little bit for the students. And our instructional coach happened to just be popping into classrooms on that day, and she was there when I was starting to implement it. And so during a break, I sought her out to ask her questions about what she thought, how it looked, what she was thinking maybe could be better. And after talking with her for a couple minutes, she suggested that perhaps she could come on into the classroom and observe, just be an extra set of eyes, and see it from an outside perspective, And then maybe she and I could sit down together and talk about it. And so we did after she observed it. And it was just great because she was able to give suggestions or many positives. She also gave many positives, but she was able to give suggestions of maybe things I could tweak or change that might make it better from things that she saw on her outside perspective. And what I love the most is everything that she said was a suggestion and a conversation. Nothing was a, you must do this. This is what needs to be done for your students. It was all, well, what if you tried this? Or what about that? It was all just a back and forth discussion. And she readily admitted that I know the students best. And she was just seeing a little snapshot of them. But those were things that she saw that maybe could change from her perspective. And it was just such an open and honest conversation that I became hooked on instructional coaching and her feedback and her assistance in helping me become better and do better by my students. And so after that, then I was eager to work with her even more. So invited her into the classroom to see other opportunities for student engagement and how I could improve those. And then we worked to sit down together to backwards plan units to make it even more streamlined for my delivery and target standards for the students. And it just went from there. I just became addicted and absolutely loved working with our instructional coach because it did nothing but make my life easier. So it was absolutely fabulous. It was so great in order to work with that outside perspective and someone who could just be knowledgeable about curriculum and different instructional strategies and help me implement them as the educator.
So what's our approach is where we really want to what we want to get into. And one of the most important parts of the principal coach relationship is making sure you're on the same page. The last thing we wanted to do was communicate different things to the staff. And the only way that this could occur was through communication and collaboration. So to start the year, Michael and I had a meeting to lay the groundwork for what the goals were for the teacher. And much like I think it was Teresa, you said, I wanted Michael to share with me. It was a new building for me. Michael was a new principal that I was working with. And I just wanted him to share with me, like, what were his goals for the building? What were some of the things that he was seeing that he wanted to improve it, and as a school as a whole, like what were some of the issues, and like then I can be kind of on the lookout and aware of them, or do I see things different? But I needed to hear from him first, because if I just went in with my own agenda, that wasn't going to work either. And so having that understanding of what his goals were and the direction he wanted to move with the staff was really important. And Michael also was able to share with me how he envisioned the role of a coach. It wasn't one specific, like, this is what a coach does, this is what a coach is. It was kind of a role that was what was evolving. So he was able to explain his goals, and he had done such a wonderful job of setting up the culture before my arrival. He set the expectations for working with a coach, and Michael explained that working with me was completely voluntary, and it wasn't just meant for classroom teachers or teachers who felt they were struggling. And so we planned, as Shannon in one of her videos had mentioned, for me to present to the staff what a coach does and all the different ways coaching can be done. And at the end of this, you'll see kind of a menu some of the other coaches and I had put together, so teachers knew different ways in which we could support them. We also wanted teachers to know that it isn't about just, do you have something that you are struggling with? It could be you have a particular population of kids this year and you have to change up the way in which you do something. And some of the things that, on this slide you can see are, as Jim Knight explains, it's, one of the easiest ways the principal can support a coach or any instructional coach is giving you that time and respecting that time and letting teachers know that that time is important. And so there's weekly check-ins, confidentiality, which we're going to get to in a little bit, but that's really, really important. And as like we can talk about issues in the building, but we're not going to go into classrooms and then go back to the principal and like say, can you believe this is going on in this room, or that, and that comes into the building trust, which we're going to get to as well. Also, according to Jim Knight, who we've done a lot of research with and built our program around some of his, philosophies and the way in which he teaches, he says researchers correlated teachers' participation in coaching and principal support behaviors, and found that teachers are much more likely to participate in coaching when the principal treats coaches as valued professionals and endorses the coach and provide support to the coach. And Michael did all of those things. I was just another member of the staff, and that was so important for them to see. I wasn't like another administrator. I was another person who could actively participate in making instructional decisions. So that was really important. So this is really interesting and might be something for those of you who are coaches out there or even administrators. We, at the presentation to the staff, our first mission was to build trust. And it was very important to be transparent and have honest conversations with teachers. They needed to know that I was not going to their classrooms and running back to Michael and saying like, can you believe this? And of course, I could share who I was working with Michael. That wasn't a bad thing. If they wanted, I might share what we were working on, but it was really identifying, more of the bigger issues in the building, but helping teachers with the things they specifically wanted to work on. And those things were confidential. So what is coaching? It is evidence-based. It's developmental based on the individual's goals and growth. And no two teachers in the building are in the same place, and it's supportive. And the most important bullet there and what it is it's confidential and founded on trust. What it isn't, and these were the things that we found were the real fears of teachers, is that there were going to be judgments and it was going to be based on opinion. And it was the competition of who can, do this the best. The big thing was it was evaluative. Teachers were really fearful that this was going to somehow impact their evaluations, and making sure that in the building relationships component that this wasn't going to impact their evaluations. And Michael's going to talk to that a little bit. And then no data or conversation that we were collecting or any of the work I was doing and observations I was making, that was for them. That was not for me to go share elsewhere unless we were using it to do some kind of a presentation to show the impact of the work that we were doing. Michael was incredibly responsive to me, and sometimes he could help. One way that we built this, what trust and this established this confidentiality with teachers was, if there was something I noticed was a bigger issue and I went to him and was able to say, hey, we need this here, or I'm noticing this in the classroom, but it's really not a teacher problem, it's a system kind of problem. He was super responsive to me. And that also bridged the gap with teachers, is like, oh, she's actually willing to advocate for us too. And I kind of was in that murky kind of place of being a middle person. I was a teacher. I'm not an administrator, but I was working with all administrators and teachers. And so I had to be very careful in that role with them.
Yeah, and I think that leads us to trust, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges in any relationship is, whether it's two kids interacting, a teacher and a teacher and a principal, or even a teacher and instructional coach, is building trust. And then Becky said, a lot of times when instructional coaches come into a school, it automatically turns into, was this an admin? Are they going to tell everything to their principal? So we were very deliberate in terms of how I rolled out trust in our building. And, Roosevelt says it really well. Nobody cares what you know until they know you care. So we kind of took this approach to start the first 2 months of the school year, where it was this approach would just be seen and be helpful. I saw the value that Becky could bring to the team, so I invited her to everything. Becky probably thought I was crazy because her schedule filled up so quickly, but she was in our MTSS meetings, our grade level meetings, our content meetings, you name it. Becky was in meetings all day long. And the only ask I gave of Becky was just to be seen and be helpful. We were never pushing coaching at all for the first couple of months. So, we had examples where during our problem-solving team meeting, we had one student who was having an issue with some of his phonics. We wanted to make sure that we did some kind of spelling inventory to get some more information. Teacher was really flustered. Becky jumped at the opportunity. Let me give the spelling inventory. We had some teachers who wanted to give some kind of interest surveys for their students to help figure out books at their level, but they were really worried about when they were going to do it. Becky jumped at the opportunity. So we just wanted the first 2-3 months really just have Becky just be seen as somebody helpful, but not push coaching at all. From there, I had been in the building for about a year already, and I started doing some instructional coaching rounds with some of our teachers. I started reaching out to our best teachers, the ones I've been working with. And I said, would you mind this round, me not working with you? I really think Becky can offer something that I can't. Would you work with them? And they all said yes. And all of a sudden what started happening in our building was all of our teachers started looking like, wow, they're working with Becky. I thought coaching was just for teachers who weren't doing well. And all of a sudden in the break room, we started talking about, you hear teachers be like, oh, I'm working with Becky in this writing unit. It's going really well. Ears started to perk up and people started to really listen. And Becky and I really created ground rules. We never met behind closed doors. We never made sure that we were in public laughing or whispering. We wanted to kind of give this mentality that there was this level of confidentiality. And we created this rule that is in place today. It's incredibly still effective. Anytime a teacher elects to work with Becky, if they pick an area, whether it's, let me backtrack real quick. Anytime I do any type of observation with a teacher, either informal or formal, I make it a point that I sit down with them and provide feedback. I don't do it via email. No matter if it's a pop-in, maybe it's 10 minutes, I always sit down and provide feedback. I share with them, I think what went well, and I think of an area that I think they can improve on. And I always encourage them to reach out with Becky. And I always tell them the exact same thing. If you reach out to Becky and you work on an area, that area moving forward is non-evaluative. I will not evaluate you on that. I'll give you feedback, but that is a safe zone because you are taking the opportunity to grow yourself. And that alone started to kind of push the wheels to this trust relationship that people felt like they could work on areas, not just come up with like fluffy goals or areas they want to grow up, but like real areas they actually knew they wanted to develop in a safe environment, knowing that when that Danielson River came around, that area was going to be blank. And that really, really started to push the movement a little bit for teachers becoming more comfortable and having that level of trust.
And so in building that trust, they were able to start to see the value of instructional coaching. We could work together, we could reflect a lot on their instruction. Teachers started collaborating with each other and conversations became more instructionally focused. It encouraged there was already a really positive school culture in the building, but it just made it even better because some of the teachers were finding, oh, well, now I understand this resource. I didn't have time to, sit and go through it, but with, working with the coach, I was able to get, a much easier view of how to figure it out. And now they were talking with each other. And really, what I've learned from my coach, I've worked with Lisa, is that you're building the capacity of teachers in the building. And by doing that, they eventually don't rely so much on you. They start teaching each other and working together. And so with that, it became a much more supportive environment. They were supportive of each other. They were patient with each other. And I think that they started to see the value of a coach is just there to do just that, coach you. And it sometimes works well, and sometimes we have to try again. So.
Becky, would you mind if we skip this slide? Because I want to make sure we continue with what we actually do. So I want to talk about what do we actually do to provide coaching support. And you can see a picture here, Becky working with the team. As a principal, especially as a newer principal, I quickly realized that old saying, you wear a lot of hats, that's not a joke. Instructional leader, cultural, parents, budgeting, communication. I quickly began to realize that I couldn't be the sole instructional leader in the school. And I realized that my instructional coach, Becky, we had so much of an opportunity to steer this ship together and empower teachers to really slowly but surely for them to be the instructional leaders of school. So I want to talk to you about really these 4 areas: the one-on-one coaching, the backwards planning in the units, how we supported data analysis, and whole school professional development. These are the 4 main areas that we really use to help support teachers. And I think this is going to give you kind of an idea in terms of how Becky and I collaborate to make sure these things come to life. So the first one is personalized coaching, and I'm going to pause, Lisa. We'll get to her in a second. But one-on-one coaching looked a lot of different ways. But my role in coaching was really through the evaluative process. And I talked a little about this earlier, that I would work with a teacher, and no matter any time I worked with them, I'd always provide them feedback. And I'd always sit down with them, always encourage them to meet with Becky. And one of the biggest pushbacks I always kind of heard from teachers is like, I want to, but I have a family. I got to grade papers. I got to listen to Seesaw. When am I going to do this? So Becky and I would always sit down. We'd always try to problem solve. When can we find time for teachers to work on their craft during the school day? Because there's enough going on a day-to-day basis for teachers, and they're already overworked. So Becky and I would always just come down to really two simple decisions. Either we try to find a half-day sub, and we give them time during the school day, and as you can see down here with Doreen, or the alternative was I would go in the classroom and teach. So there was probably a good 3 days a week where I was in the classroom for a couple hours teaching a classroom so Becky and the teacher could meet and talk. It was basically that ability where Becky and I communicated. We're like, how can we help support this teacher? When do we support this teacher? And how can we collaborate together? And there'd be times where Becky would jump into the classroom and substitute teach for a day, and I would go help with the teacher and coach them. So we kind of started creating that relationship where we knew that deep down for us to provide effective coaching support, it had to be something that they could fit in their day and not something extra. And Becky, do you want to talk a little bit more about like what coaching actually looked like for you and how you kind of managed it on a day-to-day basis? Because you ended up working with, almost like 70% of our staff at the end of the year.
Yeah, and the neat thing was it wasn't just with teachers, like in one of these, this is a reading development teacher. I worked with EL teachers. So I think the real piece is that I was in 2 buildings. And so trying to kind of keep your schedule in a way that you can be most effective. If you take on too many teachers at one time and try to work through coaching cycles with them, and it makes it very difficult to actually be the kind of support you need to be, because you can only kind of half be there. So the way in which I felt less scattered was I knew the people who were really engaged in following through and needed the support and had goals and questioned me. And there were other pieces. And so when I'd get in their classroom, it might be I'd come in and I'd observe, like with one of these teachers here, she had some challenges in her classroom, but she wasn't really sure where to approach. So I'd come into her room and I would start by just doing some observation. She was interested in motivation and engagement. So I really wasn't always observing the teacher. It was a lot of times the kids. You're looking and taking data on that. And then what I did was we'd have a meeting together. We'd talk through it. Then sometimes we'd do some planning. I'd often model a lesson and then we'd talk about that and then come back in and see if things had changed. Sometimes things had, sometimes things hadn't. Sometimes it was we needed to go in a different direction. We found out that maybe it wasn't a motivation issue. Maybe it was a content issue, that it was really too difficult and we needed to differentiate a little bit better. So it was spending a lot of time in rooms. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't work with other teachers who wanted to work with, but they may not have gone through a full coaching cycle. I might have come in and just, help support, like you want to get something more organized and do something, well, this is how we might be able to do it so that this can run more smoothly in your room. You can't work with 10 teachers and coaching cycles at one time. It's nearly impossible. But I did find the days that I wasn't at Wayne Thomas, Michael was texting me like, when are you going to be here next? Like so-and-so is looking for you. And it was hard. It was very hard to manage. But the teachers did enjoy it. And then I found other time to meet with them.
And to Anna, to your point, did we work with every single teacher in the school? We did. It may not have been Becky working with every single teacher in the school, but if we were in my office right now and I'd show you, but unfortunately the landscapers are going crazy. I have binders on my desk right now where I was going through coaching cycles with a variety of teachers as well. And that was really the value a lot of times of Becky and I sitting down in our one-on-one meetings where we'd sit down and talk about and collaborate together. How can we best support teachers as best as possible? And I would share a lot of the information with her and she'd be able to provide me some support. So yes, every teacher was getting a one-on-one coaching. Obviously the level and support of what that looked like definitely differed, but we were supporting the whole school towards the end of the year. think there's more. Sorry, it's difficult from here. Yeah, absolutely. We actually are going to be, Melissa, attaching some templates in terms of how we did backwards planning, how we were doing our data analysis meetings. All of those are going to be available to you. I don't think we have anything in terms of like how we organize it, but I can definitely, Kevin, if that's okay with you, after this is over, send something over to you and we can put that in the resources, because I've got something that worked for me, but Becky may have something that worked for her in terms of templates. I'm very much pen and paper. I think that's great. I got a million binders, but Becky's definitely more digital. So we could definitely get you something, Melissa, to kind of see how we organize things.
Yep.
And then in terms of how long did a cycle for coaching generally last? We would usually go through about a 4 to 6 week cycle with every single teacher, where we would work with them initially on a skill, popping into their classroom once or twice a week. And then after those 4 to 6 weeks, we'd obviously take a pulse check in terms of how that did. A lot of times what that would look like, Melissa, is after the 4 to 6 week cycle, the teacher would invite me back into the room, where I would then sit down and be like, oh yeah, like that was amazing. I love the growth that you've made on this. Or, hey, have you thought about changing this a little bit? And then from that meeting, a lot of times with observation, I'd say, awesome. One other thing that I noticed I think might be able to improve a little bit is this. Maybe your next coaching cycle could focus on that. And then once again, the coaching cycle would start up again. And it would really depend if it would be something that Becky was a little bit more of an expert area on, or myself. And we'd go from there again. So it wouldn't be uncommon for Becky to work with someone for 4 to 6 weeks for 3 months in a row, or it could be something where kind of just flip flop back and forth and go from there.
And a coaching cycle can be short if it's something that the teacher really catches on quick and runs with, and it could be something very quick. It doesn't have to be a 4 to 6 week. It doesn't have to be a certain time frame, but it can be something short. And everyone, just to be coached, doesn't have to go through a coaching cycle. It is a great place to go and really get deep data and really help kids and keep them kind of have a targeted purpose. But sometimes there's just something really small that a teacher wants to tweak, and it happens very, very quickly and they run with it. Sometimes it leads to something more. So
Becky, why don't you jump into the backwards planning right now, and then I'll grab the chat here and see what we can do. So what
Well, this is just, and so for some of you, in terms of templates, we did a lot of this. We had a new resource in our curriculum over the past 2 years, and the literacy was really challenging. What we were finding was a real issue with teachers is teachers are planning day to day, and they really weren't looking where they were going. So when we were talking about like learning intentions and success criteria with them, and how do they know if their students are learning the information, they really didn't have answers. So we spent a lot of time really teaching teachers how to backward plan. And so Michael was really generous in getting some half-day subs and letting me spend time planning a unit with teachers. Not that we would plan an entire unit at one time, but looking at the end. What do we want them to know and be able to do at the end, so that we could make effective decisions, whether it was small group, whole group, right from the start. What are we prioritizing in this unit? So we as coaches, and some of the other coaches I work with, created a template for writing and for reading. And it doesn't just have to be for the resource that we use, but that helped them organize some of what they were doing and made for more intentional planning, which was very foreign to a lot of our teachers. Yeah. And it was just a way that teachers had a safe space to kind of ask questions and say things that they felt were, is it okay that I didn't know this? Well, yeah, you really haven't had a lot of PD and structure up until this point. So
Becky, I want to make sure we're good on time. This is where a lot of what you're going to see as a trend here is all of our coaching happened in the school day. If I couldn't find half-day subs to support this learning, because I really think it's important, because the idea of a teacher being able to go to work and be like, I don't need to worry about grading this paper right now. I need to worry about this planning. I'm just going to focus on instructional planning. This is where a lot of times I would be in a classroom, or my AP and I would be in a classroom together, teaching for 2.5 hours to give the teachers the time necessary. And what we found after doing 2 or 3 of these cycles is that the amount of teachers who wanted to backwards plan every single unit was unbelievable. And this was just one of the elements. The key element, we're going to skip Shannon today because I know we're short on time. The biggest piece for us was the data analysis meeting. I put a picture of a door on here because this opened the door for everything. We changed our whole approach in terms of how we looked at data. We give NWA, which I think many of you are familiar about, 3 times a year. And then afterwards, about a week later, we look at data analysis together. This time around, we completely changed it up. I met with every single teacher prior to going over their data. There was some laughter, there was some crying, and there was some tears. But it was really important because I wanted to create a culture where when we got to these data analysis meetings, we weren't feeling scared or worried about our data. I left every single one-on-one meeting with just the common phrase that, like, your data is your data and it's in the past. I don't care about what your data says anymore. You could have been the highest performing teacher in the district. I don't care anymore. What I care about now moving forward is what plan are you going to be putting in place? And we were able to put together a phenomenal structure. We were able to bring Becky and I in, and we worked with teachers on a one-on-one basis. And at the end of every data analysis meeting, which is about 3 to 4 hours, we always said to them, you've got one opportunity now to grow. How are you going to push your kids? And we gave them an option. You can meet with Becky and backwards plan. You could create formative assessments. You could, I can't remember the last one, so I apologize. But at the end of our meeting, I said, now there's a level of like, what's going to happen next? And every teacher had to pick something. And I told them every week we were going to check in terms of how we're making forward, how we're doing towards that progress. There was that level of accountability. And what we started to see was every single teacher in the school was starting to request meetings now because they weren't embarrassed about their data anymore. They weren't embarrassed that like they knew they had to work on something. So everyone was either working with Becky or myself, and that's what we were using a lot of our coaching cycles in. But we went from our first year, we were projected to grow 2% in our IAR, and we went up 10%. And our culture scores went from being in the bottom to being #1 for student, staff, and teachers in the whole district. We were averaging around 90% of our staff highly engaged and satisfied with the work that we were doing. And this was the key that really opened the door and opened the floodgates for coaching and culture in our whole building. That was probably a lot, Becky. I apologize. I'm very passionate about our data analysis meeting.
No, I just feel like I'm being mindful of the time, and I know we're
So, Kevin, where are we at, sir?
So actually, if we could wrap up, any closing thoughts that you'd like to share? I think that this has just been fantastic. Just a reminder, we will have this recording posted on our Edmonton, Illinois YouTube channel, as well as those resources available that we talked about during the keynote. So, Michael, Becky, I'm going to make an assumption that you would be fine with someone reaching out for questions or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share any resources and such. I think it just all comes down to, like I said, the building and coach relationships with the principal. Having that similar mindset around how do we grow teachers and what kind of sacrifices are we willing to make. Every single kid in the school knows my name because I've been in every classroom probably teaching every single day. But that's the kind of sacrifice I think needs to be made because teachers shouldn't be expected to do more work outside of school. We already ask them so much to do as it is. How can we support their learning in the building, and how can we give them the resources necessary to be successful? And Becky was phenomenal in terms of being my partner and being able to provide that.
Thanks. And the last slide, though, just if you go to, it's some of the, there is a real interesting survey that we gave is what a coach is and what a coach is not. Was really great to give staff a sample coaching menu of things you can, a way to kind of get yourself in the door. And then the data analysis sample template that Michael was talking about, of giving teachers an accountability. And then they often open the door to work with it opened the door to work with a coach. So, and we can share some other of the backward planning.
Yeah, and I'll find the coaching template for you guys. It's very similar to anybody's done writer's workshop that you work with your students on when you walk around with their journals. Very similar model. That's about all our time. I want to thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, everybody who chimed in. You've got our Twitter handles. Send us some messages. We're happy to talk. And I just want to wish everyone a good luck this year in our new norm of education. Thank you, guys.
Thank you
so much, Michael, Becky. Really appreciate it. And if you're heading to your next session, go ahead and click on that link, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.